Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, August 17th, 2020. I am Dave Biddle. I am very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, of course, the story of the day is Justin Fields starting a petition yesterday that now has over 250,000 signatures already. Justin Fields is urging the Big Ten to reinstate football immediately. Now, this might be a Hail Mary pass, but is there any chance this is going to work, Patrick?
First of all, I think props to Justin Fields. I mean, this is a guy who, didn't grow up watching Ohio State football, didn't grow up watching Big Ten football. Obviously, everyone knows his story. His recruitment was originally committed to Penn State, I guess, so it does have some connection here, but went to Georgia, ended up transferring to Ohio State after not playing. Has only really been here for a little over a year and a half in Columbus, but has not only, fallen in love with Ohio State, fallen in love with Big Ten football, but really become quite a leader. And obviously he was named captain earlier this year by his teammates and Ryan Day, which speaks a lot to, what he's become. But to do something like this, to kind of stand up and, a lot of people have put stuff out on Twitter and the hashtag and whatnot, but to actually start a petition and go that extra step is pretty impressive for anyone. Not to mention a guy who is probably not going to be here in a few months, regardless of whether there's a season or not. So, I think that needs to be said first and foremost. Ohio State, whether we see Justin Fields in uniform or not, again, had an impressive player both on and off the field. As for the petition itself, it's tough to say. I mean, I think you put it right with it's probably a bit of a Hail Mary. He's very adamant about this, and he was just on ESPN radio, and we've got a story on the site about it that Steve Hellwagon did. But, there was a report yesterday that the Big Ten was aware of the petition. I don't know if this in particular changes the tide, changes people's decisions. I do think it says something, and I think, a combination of things. Maybe they change their. I'm hesitant to try and get people's hopes up, get my own hopes up, frankly, about it after everything that the back and forth that we've gone through, not just this past week, but these past several weeks with all this. So I think it's a great effort, and I really commend Justin Fields for doing it. I don't know if it will change things ultimately, but that's not the reason for doing something like this is if it ultimately works or not. I mean, obviously that's what you want, but it still shows a lot being able to stand up like that.
Yeah, what a leader. We'll get into the evolution of Fields as a leader in a moment, but if anybody on the team was going to do this, if it's going to work, it's Justin Fields. He's got the most name recognition, not just because he's a quarterback, but that certainly helps that he's a quarterback, but just he's a national star. And if Josh Myers came out and did it, that would have been really cool. I'm sure he would have got a lot of signatures, but for Justin Fields to do it really carries, again, I'm with you. I don't want to get my hopes up here. I don't want to get the listeners' hopes up because, frankly, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think it's going to work, but I hope it does. But if it's going to work, I'm glad it's coming from Fields because he's the one that can make it happen.
Absolutely. And this wasn't something that he did in conjunction with Ohio State or it even seems like other guys. I mean, it's kind of grown naturally. I'm sure he talked to teammates and players about it beforehand or whatnot, but he said on his ESPN radio interview, he didn't talk to Ohio State about it. And clearly coaches have gotten behind it. You've seen them all tweet out the links and whatnot. But yeah, I think when Fields arrived last year, I think the first time we talked to him, you got the sense it was a confident guy. Obviously he was, the number 2 player in the country coming out of high school and had a lot of talent and whatnot. But, I didn't at that point see this kind of leadership that he has developed. It reminds me, talking to him now reminds me a lot more of like a JT Barrett who, just exuded that I'm a leader, guys follow me type of swagger, confident, whatever you want to call that it. And, there's been a lot of guys. JT's just the first one that comes to mind. And Justin Fields, whether he had that before and it just didn't come out, or whether that's developed over this year at Ohio State, has got that now. And, that's going to serve him well beyond his Ohio State career. But it's great to see him doing that now. And, I hope for him and for all these guys, for everyone involved, that he's able to, in some form or fashion, lead physically this team on the football field again.
If he's able to save this season, my gosh, he's already going to be one of the favorite players.
Give him the Heisman. Just give it to him.
Right. Name it the Justin Fields Award.
Yeah.
Sorry, John Heisman, you've had a good run. Where it's now the Fields Award. But my goodness gracious, is he going to be beloved? Even Michigan fans might love him. Well, until Ohio State beats them for the 9th straight time because of Justin Fields. But it's just so impressive, man. And it's like the number one story in sports right now. Like I turned on ESPN this morning. It was the lead story. As you mentioned, Justin himself was on ESPN radio this morning. Steve Hellwagon, as you mentioned, there's a story on our site right now that people can read. And Justin Fields, Patrick, would have every reason to say, okay, Hayes in the barn. I'm going to train for the NFL. Forget this. I'm going to be at least the number 2 pick of the draft, maybe the number 1 overall pick of the draft. I'm just going to get ready for the NFL and my millions. Instead, he wants to play college football for another season as much as anybody. He was asked why. This is the headline of Steve's story. He said, quote, "For the love of the game." I mean, it's just so impressive. These kids love playing, but usually when you're that high of a projected as a pick, you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to go get my money now. That's not Justin Fields. He loves football, and I hope it works, man.
Well, here's the full quote from Justin on that ESPN interview. Really, it's just for the love of the game and college football and my teammates for Ohio State. I've seen guys battle back from injuries. I've seen how hard our coaches have fought for us to play. It's really just my love for the game. And, I think that says a lot. It says more than anything, what kind of kid this is. As you mentioned, he could be the number 2 pick in the draft. He'd be the number 1 pick in the draft. He could not have to worry about whether or not there's a Big Ten season. He's done enough, I think, to cement himself as a top pick for sure. On top of that, there's probably a few players in the Big Ten that if they decided to transfer right now, teams would make room on limited scholarships for them. And Justin Fields is one of them. If he called Ed Ogeron at LSU and said, "Hey, I want to come down and win you guys another national championship," I'm sure they would find a way to make room with their scholarship limits, given losing Justin or Joe Burrow and whatnot, and I just use that as an example. I think that the fact that not only does he not want to go train for the NFL, he's not thinking about transferring. We asked him when we talked to him recently about opting out. He said that hadn't even crossed his mind for this season. This was before, obviously, the Big Ten made their announcement. It's this kid loves to play football, and you can tell. I think during the time when guys were quarantining back at home, there were videos of him and his workouts and everything he was doing to stay ready, determined. Obviously, Ohio State has a great team this year. He wanted to lead this team. They felt they could accomplish something special. And, you can just see how much this game means to him and specifically doing it with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier I want to talk about the evolution of Justin Fields as a leader. What I mean by that is I'll never forget the first time I interviewed him. He had been on campus maybe like a week or two, and he was able to pull him aside after we interviewed him and took a picture of him. Again, he barely could put 2 words together at that time, and you could tell he was intelligent, but he just wasn't comfortable yet taking on that leadership role. And you can, even if you are like a natural leader like he is, you can understand why. You go to Georgia for a year, then you come to Ohio State, you've been on campus for like a week or two, you're meeting all of these new teammates. You're not from the state of Ohio, you're from the South. I mean, every reason that you could think of. It took him a while, and then we saw it start to build during the season. And yeah, it's just been amazing that less than a year and a half after he's enrolled at Ohio State, he's now this extreme supreme leader. He's just a natural, awesome leader, in addition to being just so physically gifted. But anyway, the evolution of Fields as a leader, I've seen this time and time again with different Ohio State players over the years, where you talk to them as a freshman or when they first get to Ohio State and you're thinking, okay, this guy's never going to be much of a leader, and they turn into one. And Fields is the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, I think in any of those type of situations you just described, and everyone's done it, starting a new job, first day of school, whatever the situation may be, where regardless of your personality, with a few exceptions, people take some time to just kind of fit in with everything. And Ryan Day even said he felt like Fields could have been a captain last year, but they wanted him to become a third-year player and have another year in the program and things like that. The one thing I will say is I think you could tell very quickly by watching guys walk off the field, and even at the start of the season last year in that first game, guys gravitated towards him, and, teammates liked him and wanted to be around him. There was, when we were in spring practice, there was a huddle around him walking off. He was kind of the popular guy. obviously being a quarterback and as highly, recruited and as much talent as he has, that plays a part in it. But, there's just something that it factor that they talk about with him. And, this has obviously been an opportunity to show that not only, publicly in Columbus and with Ohio State, but on a national level. And so I think if this does, anything, it at least demonstrates that. And I think regardless of whether there's a season or not, Buckeye fans, college football fans are going to remember, hey, Justin Fields fought to the end on this thing. And like we said before, we hope it works, but it's just impressive in general.
It certainly is. And I want to ask you about Kevin Warren, Big Ten commissioner. He picked a great year to start as a Big Ten commissioner. We never thought we'd be missing Jim Delaney so quickly. And I think Kevin Warren's handled this awfully. I think he is just, he doesn't come across as a very good leader. We're talking about Justin Fields' leadership. I wish Kevin Warren had some of the same leadership skills. But then again, I do want to be fair here, because Kevin Warren, if he just woke up today and said, okay, I want there to be football, to my understanding, the Big Ten presidents are the ones that make that decision. And with or without Kevin Warren, they voted to not have football. What are you hearing there? Just clear that up for me. If Kevin Warren wanted to have football, he would still have to clear this through the Big Ten presidents, who, now some want football. We know some Big Ten presidents want football, but a majority do not. So they would have to change their minds too. Just unpack all that for me if you would.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. The vote was among the presidents. I think Kevin Warren obviously has an impact. A lot of people have impacts. Athletic directors, they've all had their say, I believe, and whatnot.
Everybody except the players and the parents have a say in this, apparently, and coaches.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the ones taking the risk. No big deal.
I think it's so hard to make, for us to educatedly say, what their decision was based on, because we don't have that information, right? And that's one of the things that the parents have stressed in their, the letter they put out, the communication I think everyone's had with them is not only do they want a season, but if you're not going to have a season, we'll give us the medical information that tells us, hey, this is why the Big Ten's doing this, but compare that to the ACC, the SEC, whoever. Why not make that public and let people know? If they've got some valid reasons here, then I think people should know that. And it's just so hard to say, well, that they're scared of college football because of this, or they're making the right or wrong choice. And it's obviously become such a debate. This everything with COVID and whatnot. But if there's a lot of information that the Big Ten has that is by that I mean the presidents, Kevin Warren, whoever. I think that's what we need to know to then say, okay, they've handled this right, they've handled this wrong. Right now, we just know they think it's not safe. When Kevin Warren was on the Big Ten Network after the decision was announced, he didn't answer a lot of the questions. It was really a facade of an interview, because he just wouldn't, despite being asked the same thing multiple times and rephrasing questions to try and get something out of him, he just wouldn't answer it. And to me, that's either they don't have enough information and they made this decision based on, just little bits and pieces of unsubstantiated information, or he just doesn't want to put that out for some reason, or maybe the presidents haven't communicated to him, which would be astounding to me. So that was where he lost me. I thought as a lawyer, that's Kevin Warren's background. I could understand the liability stuff and things like that may come into his mind right away, just the way a lawyer would think. So say that, you give some reasons, don't dance around questions and whatnot. And, we take it back to Justin Fields. Was just on this radio interview, and, obviously a different situation. He's fighting for the popular side of things. So it's a little bit easier, but he answers every question, even the one about, hey, you could be in the NFL next year. Why is this something you want to fight for? And I forget who the two interviews were off the top of my head, but they commended him. And the guy said, hey, that's a tough question for a guy to ask. So thank you for answering that truthfully like that. So if we're comparing the two, I think despite having the popular opinion, Justin Fields is coming out smelling like roses, whereas Kevin Warren, who again had to make the difficult decision, or did make the difficult decision, does not smell nearly as good.
He certainly does not look as good as Justin Fields. And I tell you, I mentioned this earlier in the show, the word is getting out. I mean, ESPN is all over this morning. It was the lead story, and then you hit the top of the hour, and they're talking about it again with the new panel. I mean, this is the number one story in sports that they're trying to save this season again. We don't know if it's going to work, but Way to go, Justin Fields. Props to Justin Fields, as you said, Patrick. Great stuff from Patrick Murphy. And thank you to all listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate that. Get those glow sticks out, kids.